Transcripts and recordings of the podcast may not be used for any purpose without the direct written permission of the podcast owner. Welcome to Light It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action, to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah M. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Light It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah M. I am so excited about today's episode because, as always, I try to bring to you very interesting and insightful guests who will be able to impart information to my viewing and listening audience. So today, my guest is Melanie Hall. She is the CEO of Insights Therapeutic Services, and she's also a licensed clinical professional counselor. Welcome to Light It Up, Melanie. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I am doing wonderful. It is a little gloomy out, but we're going to work through that, right? Because every day is a good day.
That's right. And, of course, we're in the Windy City.
Yeah.
We have
Be prepared for anything.
Exactly. You never know what season you may get because I think it was like 52 degrees earlier this morning. Probably before everybody was up.
Wide awake. Yes.
Exactly. But that's okay. It's still going to be a good.
Adjust.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you were able to join me today because I think we've talked about this before, about the importance of mental health and taking care of our mental health, particularly in the African American community. And you and I connected, and I wanted to bring you on so that we could talk about your practice and really talk about the importance of folks taking care of their mental and emotional health. But before we get into that, why don't you just take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about your background, where you went to school, if you do that, and how you decided to get into the mental health field.
Okay. Well, I am born and raised in Chicago, South Side.
Yeah.
High school, Luther South. I was a private school kid. My college life went a few different directions. There's like a 10-year gap in my education because life happened. I went to Roosevelt. So I've done my undergrad and my graduate work there. Undergrad was sociology, which I still love. It is still one of my favorite topics. And then for grad school, I did clinical mental health counseling.
Okay.
I actually, I had a very colorful background in terms of fields. I have always been in a level of service to some degree with everything that I've done. I've sold real estate for 11 years, and that is kind of what led me this way. Part of that service where I had a lot of conversations with couples and buyers on why they were buying at that time, why they wanted to sell at that time. I worked with a lot of investors, and in the conversations with people, I was able to actually counsel some people like out of making a huge financial mistake, right? And couples that couldn't agree, and it's like, do you think you all are really ready to do this? And so in years of doing that, it felt just so natural because people have always kind of come to me and talked to me about things that are going on in their life. My husband always says, I don't know what it is that people just open up to you. My sister, who is no longer with me, was a social worker, and she was doing therapy. And she is probably the one person that said, I think you would do great with this. And after talking to a few professors, it became very clear that this was where I needed to be. So I have now been practicing individually with my own practice for the last 7 years. We just made a 7th-year birthday in the business.
Oh,
Mhm.
congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And that is such, that's such an interesting way as I think about it to enter into the field
Yeah.
by way of real estate. But I can see honestly the correlation if you are as an agent, because I'm thinking back to my first time home buying experience.
Mhm.
My realtor she became a part of my family, to be honest with me, because I was communicating with her all of
Mhm.
the time. She was
Yep.
giving me advice about,
Yes.
okay, do you you're qualified for this, but do you
Right.
want to spend the money and buy this condo with these
Mhm.
tremendous assessments, or do you just want to get a single family home?
Yes.
Very much
Because
a
home
part.
buying is an emotional process.
Exactly, exactly, because you're all over the place.
Absolutely. I don't want to make the wrong choice. And,
Right.
you have to tap into what's motivating me to do it right now and what's motivating me to want to either go, push the envelope financially.
Mhm.
So there's a whole lot of emotions that are tied into that. So,
Now, I'm just going to take like a quick little detour because this
okay.
is something that I just thought about. I'm into to a certain degree
Mhm.
into astrology and those zodiac signs. There's one thing that I think that makes you one reason why you're probably an excellent counselor or chose to go into the field is because you're a Virgo, right?
I am. I am. I am.
People just don't understand. We give the greatest advice.
We give the greatest advice. Do we always follow our own?
No, not all the time.
But we just have this uncanny ability to see people for who they are in that moment and meet them where they are and
Mhm,
say, well, it sounds to me like, and then
mhm.
before you know it, this full-blown conversation has occurred and they're like, oh my goodness, you helped me so much. And that even wasn't even your goal at that moment. You didn't know they needed the help.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting how that happens. I think it's just a natural gift.
Yes, I
Uh,
believe so as well.
so, for those who don't know, what is the difference between a licensed professional counselor and then a licensed clinical social worker? Because I know if people are looking for therapeutic services, you pretty much have two categories, right? In terms of the type of clinician that you can select, or
Well,
more than that.
Well, you have psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and counselors. Okay.
Okay.
So the difference between licensed clinical professional counselors and licensed clinical social workers is really kind of a school of thought,
Okay.
where social work will oftentimes start with um, community resources, linkage to resources. They may sometimes have to take extra classes to do counseling, but it is still very common for a social worker to become a licensed therapist, right?
Okay.
Licensed clinical professional counselors, we focus on nothing but counseling. I would say it's probably a bit of a deficit in the program where it comes to linkage to resources, but is definitely something you can pick up along the way, just like social workers can pick up counseling along the way. Psychologists tend to test more, so that's where you may get some of your clinical testing for like ADHD or something like that, or maybe some other neurological things that may be occurring. They will do therapy as well sometimes, but they do have the ability to do clinical testing. And then you have psychiatrists that primarily do medication management. People will say, they only sat and talked to me for about 10 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, you kind of get 15 minutes with them. You
Mhm.
don't commonly see psychiatrists do therapy, but there are some that do.
Okay. And I don't know why I just totally glossed over counselors and psychiatrists because as you were talking about the differences, the initial thought that came to my mind is when you talk to people about going to therapy,
Mhm.
the one common thing that you may hear is people say, well, I'm not crazy. I
Yes.
don't need to see. They automatically think about a psychiatrist or being
Yes.
medicated, or you know what I mean? Or
Yes.
so at least you were able to, differentiate the
Yes.
fields so that
Yes.
people have a clear understanding of the difference, that
Yes. Yes.
you're not going to see a psychiatrist for
Absolutely.
therapy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's also this fear of getting in my head, right?
Mhm.
And I always say, people, you know your story better than I do. And I can only work with the parts of your story that you give me. It's not to get into your head, it's to identify some of the motivations as to why you do the things that you do or don't do.
Mhm.
To help you get to the next step where you're really, what's your goal, whether it is symptom management or sometimes even a blend of therapy and coaching, because you want to get someplace, right? People want to become a better version of themselves so that they can do something different in life. And sometimes the biggest piece is talking to someone that is completely unbiased about what you're trying to do, and you become kind of like their cheerleader, right? The one person that you don't know me. You know the pieces of me that I share, but you see something in me that you pull out and help me use it as a tool to motivate myself.
Mm. Excellent. So let's talk about insights. You stated that you just recently celebrate 7 years
Yes, ma'am.
of having your practice.
Mhm.
What was the I guess what was the deciding factor for you to step out there and launch your own practice?
So, just a little bit of a personal story. So, I have chronic autoimmune issues.
Mhm.
I have lupus, just to be specific. I have lupus, and I have something called Sjogren's disease. And this is where I tend to experience a lot of joint pain and discomfort and things like that. Take quite a bit of medication. When I decided to start my practice, I was working for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I'm just gonna say that it was more of like a patient education. So I would
Mhm.
go out into the community and go into people's homes, sometimes the hospital, with the goal of making sure they stay on top of their health management. And once I had my diagnosis and became ill with sepsis, it was, I should not be going into people's homes in the hospital. And so at that point, it kind of became a no-brainer for me to
Yeah.
start my own practice so that I can manage my health the way that I needed to and
Mhm.
not have constraints such as I have to be someplace at this particular time, I have to drive a long distance, or I have to put myself at risk going into people's homes and hospitals when I could create my own environment safe for me,
Mhm.
and work at the level that I can work to maintain, to, add some longevity to my own life.
Okay. Wow. Um, so considering now this is 7 years ago,
Yes, ma'am.
dealing with health challenges, but then recognizing that you needed to create a professional life that was also going to help you
And
maintain a certain personal or a certain quality of life, obviously, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
What was the, I guess, when you sat down and decided, okay, this is what I need to do as far as
Mhm.
starting my own practice, did you start solo? Did you have other therapists that you brought on board, or did you kind of build out
Yes.
as you went along?
Totally started solo. Um, and I think it's good to start solo because you start to build the type of practice that you want others to come into. And it's kind of hard to identify that if you start out with a group, then they
Mm,
go through all the ups and downs with you. And
mm,
that might be frustrating for people,
yeah.
because there are a lot of ups and downs. There's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of learning how to be an entrepreneur, right? I
Mhm.
sold real estate for 11 years, an entrepreneur, but it's very different when you started from, you created the logo, you created the name, you create the framework, and it
Mhm.
takes a bit of time to create that. So starting solo, I actually, I was joking with someone not too long ago, and I said, I felt bad charging what I was charging,
Mm.
which was $55.
What?
Mhm, mhm.
Now,
Fif-
why did you feel bad charging $55?
Because you're helping. You're in the helping field, and you're seeing people a lot of times at their worst, right? And they're coming to you with a lot of emotional baggage. Help me, right? It's a cry for help.
Yeah.
But oh, I'm sorry, I have to charge you,
Mm.
right? So there was a lot of processing internally for me about determining the value that I was bringing and how to put a number on that.
Mhm.
And so over time, I became okay with,
Mhm.
no, this is I'm providing something, but I also invested in myself to do that. So I'm essentially paying myself back on my investment
Mhm. Yeah.
by charging, a comparable rate for a service that I and others provide.
Right. So let's talk about this logo and the name Insights, because I
Yes,
see your logo behind you. I absolutely love it. I see the
thank you.
butterfly that
Thank you.
kind of has metamorphosed into an eye,
Yes,
right?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So what's the story behind? Because there's always something. I know there has to be some type of meaning
Yeah.
behind coming up with the name Insights and then your logo.
When I sat with the graphic designer, there were a couple of long conversations about it. Who knew that so much went into creating a logo?
Mhm.
And the questions that he was asking really had to do with, my journey and how I got there. My sister and I were supposed to do this practice together, and we talked a lot about the transformation that occurs in people's lives, going from phases and stages. And we would always kind of relate that to a butterfly and how they transform and the discomfort that a butterfly likely goes through to
Mhm.
become such a beautiful thing. And so the butterfly became that part. Purple has always been my favorite color. It's a very vibrant color. It speaks life to me, and therefore insights, because I want people to become insightful about their own lives, because it's sometimes when you are weighed down by so much, you lose that insight. You lose the ability to go within. And so when people come into the practice, when they see the logo, I want them to understand this is about you getting to know you. This is about you becoming very self-aware so that you can identify the changes that need to occur for yourself, right? So Insights Therapeutic Services is the therapy side. And you probably also see something that says Insights Academy,
Yeah.
and that is where workshops and trainings occur. That would be like the anger management, that would be the coaching side of business. That's the non-therapeutic side, but yet still very therapeutic, right? Because it's still the people business.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Awesome story. I
Thank
love
you.
that. I love that.
Mm.
So let's get into your practice. What type of, I guess, who's your clientele? And
Mhm.
as far as the number of therapists that you have there, do you all work with couples, families, teenagers? What's
Yeah.
the makeup of your practice?
So there's seven of us. I being the owner, the
Mhm.
lead. And I don't even like saying boss. It just feels very big I, little you. Uh,
Mhm.
excuse me. But there are I have seven therapists. And all of us, for the most part, kind of see therapy the same. And it's really interesting. Part of the reason why you want to start as solo, because you want to identify what type of practice do I want. So all of us, for the most part, have the same goal. And for the most part, all of us have the same approach, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. We see adults primarily. We don't see kids. The youngest age that we see is 12, and there's one therapist that loves that population.
Mhm.
She will see adults, but she does love working with with the youth.
Mhm.
And then I have another therapist. Her and I are both trained in EMDR. So we are also always into what can I learn to share with my clients. But cognitive behavioral therapy is primarily what we all do. The population that we reach out to, definitely adults and couples. There's 3 of us that takes couples. I take the high conflict couples. I love working with couples because my own journey was just, like I said, very colorful, and
Mhm.
I understand both sides
Okay.
most often. And we work a lot with communication. And I don't think people realize how much communication plays a role for couples and individuals. When you think about how many people come to therapy discussing all the other people around them, and learning how to communicate their needs, how to put boundaries in place, there's a huge component of learning how to advocate for yourself, right?
Mhm.
So we see that in our population primarily, which is indicative of the community we're in, which is Homewood Flossmoor area.
Mhm.
So our population is really reflective of where we are. We probably treat, I'm going to say 85% African American, and probably 40% of that is male. So we get actually a lot of males that come. Yes.
Wow,
And
that's great to
it's
hear.
so awesome to see when
Yeah,
they come. It's like, bring them through the door, right?
yeah.
Because we want to help everyone, but we know how interpersonal relationships are, how the communication breaks down, that we love to see men come through the door.
Mhm. Yeah, that is huge.
Yes.
Um, so I don't want to glance over this, but I like for you because you did mention that you and another therapist are trained in EMDR. But
Yes.
if you could just explain cognitive behavior therapy for those who don't know exactly what that means, and then EMDR, what
Sure.
exactly is that?
So cognitive behavioral therapy is where if you can identify the negative thought patterns or the thought patterns that are disruptive to homeostasis,
Mhm.
then if you can change the perspective or the thought, reframe those thoughts, you can change how you respond and react to people. Right. So it's kind of in the name, cognitive behavioral, right? I
Mhm.
could get very technical, but for the
Mhm.
purpose of this right here,
Yeah.
the cognitive part being adjusting your thoughts,
Mhm.
right? And the
Mhm.
behavioral part, because you'll change what you do, how you respond,
Mhm.
and even how you treat yourself.
Mhm.
So, some people will, that aren't so aware may say, well, that's you getting in my head. No, I'm teaching you how to get into your own head and how to adjust your thinking patterns, because it really does matter. When you adjust the way that you see a situation, it
Mhm.
changes the way that you respond in that situation.
Right.
EMDR is more of a modality where you want to kind of tap in, it may sound a little hocus pocus, because I even had my um, shrug my shoulder at some of it because it just sounded very hocus pocus. It almost sound like hypnosis, but it is not. Once I actually, when we do training, sometimes you are the client, right?
Mhm.
So when I did it, I was like, okay, actually, this kind of works. So the modality of it, to just give you a framework for it, it is bilateral stimulation that will allow you to kind of fragment the ruminating thoughts.
Ooh,
Okay.
that's a
It,
mouthful.
it, it is a mouthful. And so through bilateral stimulation that may sometimes look like this, what
Okay.
you're doing is remapping the brain.
Okay.
Okay. And it's not in a hocus pocusy type of way. It is, we go through certain experiences, traumatic ones especially, which is what EMDR was grown out of. And it's as though your brain is stuck in a loop.
Okay.
Okay. So I keep experiencing the same thing. I keep ruminating about the same thing. I'm still anxious about the same thing, as though I haven't left that traumatic event. Okay. And so the goal of the bilateral stimulation is to kind of interrupt the brain from staying on this course. We want to change course. So if we can visualize other things, if we can reframe some of it in such a way where it's not that I'm helpless. There was just no one to help me at that time, right?
Mhm.
But I am able to help myself now, right? So there's still a little bit of that component of thinking, but the goal of the eye movement is remapping the brain. And so you get the eye movement going with a light or the bilateral stimulation in that way. There's tappers as well. It does take some getting used to for clinicians and clients, but we do hear that it's very helpful in kind of breaking that train of thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I learned something. So thank you.
You
Because
are more than welcome.
I've been seeing that, just
Yeah.
with my own search for therapists, because
Yeah.
I don't make it a secret. I believe that everybody needs
Yeah.
to see a
Yeah.
therapist.
It's a mental health check-in. You do physical
Exactly.
health check-ins, you go to the eye doctor, you do
Right.
all these things, but mentally, we keep that so private, understandably so, because not everyone needs to be privy to how you think and feel.
Right.
But there's a time and a space where we all just get caught up in our own sabotaging behavior.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're perfectionists. Sometimes we just don't have good boundaries.
Mhm.
I know Virgo, right? Because we are
Yeah.
total perfectionists. We get caught in those cycles of life, and we don't know how to come out of that phase because life has changed. We
Yeah.
keep trying to do the same old thing with new situations, and we're not getting anywhere, and we're not sure why. And a lot of times it's because of the way we're looking at situations.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, I can speaking for myself, I believe the first time I met with a therapist, I was probably, I'll have to do the math. I know it was around 2000.
Mhm,
Yeah, so 23 years ago.
mhm.
And I was in law school. Yeah, I think I was in law school working full time. So maybe it was 2001.
Yeah.
But I was toying with the idea, I'm pretty sure in 2000, because
Yeah.
I was stressed. I had gone straight through undergrad and grad
Oh, wow.
school, started
Yeah.
working full time, and then was applying to law school, got
Mhm.
into law school. And then in 2000, I guess I don't know when I got engaged. All I know is I'm not married now,
It
but
it just happened.
it happened. So I know I got married in 2002. So
Mhm.
it was somewhere in
Big
between
life
that time.
change.
Yes.
Mhm.
Major life change.
Mhm.
And I didn't feel like I had anyone around me who could relate or
Yeah.
understand what
Yeah.
I was going through. I was the only one in my friend group who was getting married.
Mhm.
I was also the only one in my friend group, maybe that had at least completed multiple degrees by that time,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So I couldn't talk to them because either they were just entering into the workforce,
Yeah.
they were dating, they were living the time in their lives, not trying to settle
You're over
down
here
at
with
20 something.
you are over here with some real life
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
feeling kind of isolated by
Mm,
what you've created.
yeah,
And sometimes that's the piece that's really hard to accept, right?
yeah.
Like, I created this, and it's like, we don't stop to think, when you created this, how old were you? How
Mm,
old were you emotionally,
yeah.
right? And how much of this is what you thought about when you were much younger versus how you really feel about it now,
Ooh, you
right?
get in my head. But you're so right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right, because here's the thing, I had planned my life out since I was like a little girl or a teenager, which is,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna say it's crazy, but it's like, who does that? Why are you doing this? Like I
But
had
there's still this piece of, the American dream
yeah.
that we have in our heads that we think we want, right? Not
Mhm.
realizing you can tailor the dream for
Right.
you, right?
Yeah.
So we have so many different messages of television
Mhm.
media that
Yeah.
has planted seeds in our brains, and then we're not sure why some of it doesn't feel the way we thought it would when we get there. And sometimes that's because you really weren't doing a self-check along the way to see if this is still really what you wanted. Does it really fit who you are,
Yeah.
right? And then comes the conversation, well, who am I? And it's like, that's a better conversation,
Oh, yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Because who you are is not any of those roles.
Right.
It is who you are, what's your character? Who are you to your core? Take that to what you do. Don't go do the thing and
Mhm.
think I'm going to become. No, become and then go do the thing, because you will take who you are throughout.
I feel like I'm in a session right now.
It goes
That's
naturally for me.
natural.
Look, it's very natural because
Yeah.
I lived it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it's
Mhm.
part of the reason why I do what I do, because
Mhm.
I don't want people to spend the time that I spent on being angry, resentful,
Mhm.
confused, um, disappointed, having dreams deferred, and feeling like a failure. I want people to spend as least amount of time there as possible.
Mhm.
You don't have to be there for years to have a story.
Yeah.
The simple fact that you got there, you know that you can turn it around. The problem is a lot of times we don't want to make some decisions that turns it around,
Yeah.
because we're nervous about how other people will think and feel.
Mhm.
So then that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, indeed. But I will say that the best decision that I made was trying to gain some type of control to
Mhm.
go out to seek, help from somebody who could like help me navigate this very stressful
Yeah.
and emotional time in my life.
Mhm.
Um, and I it helped. So I think over the years, as I'm thinking about it, I have met with so I did the individual counseling, started that, 20 years ago, did that for a period of time and thought, okay,
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm good. Mhm.
And then fast forward, um, probably 2010, no, maybe 2011.
Mhm.
I was
All hit
back,
the fan.
a whole different
Yeah.
ball game at that point. Now I've been married for a while, got 3
Mhm.
children,
Yeah.
was in the midst of finishing my doctorate.
So many moving parts.
So many moving parts, was now a stay-at-home mom,
Mhm.
which had not been my ministry because I had been working since I was 16.
Yeah. You're
And
like, what am I supposed to do with this?
yeah, and
Mhm.
then in a marriage that was like, on the outside, everybody thought, "Oh, they're picture
Yeah.
perfect," but it was like,
Nuclear bomb when you get home every time.
"Hello."
Mhm.
And I knew that I had to make some decisions, and again, best time for me to go and talk to somebody who could relate. Because
Yeah.
again, I can't
Mhm.
talk to my parents because
Absolutely.
I don't want to share what's really going on.
And you know what they think.
Exactly, exactly. And then friends, now my friends are starting to get married. So of course I don't want to be the Debbie Downer,
Exactly.
you know. But yeah, and that of course helped me to make some key
Yeah,
decisions. Do
absolutely.
you and it was amazing. I think one thing that I did during that time, which was very helpful,
Mhm.
my therapist told me I should start to keep a journal.
Yeah.
And so to be able to go back and review what
Mm.
I was going through and then how far I've come has been so very helpful. So I guess what I want to help people to understand is that the folks that there's nothing wrong with therapy, first of all.
Nothing wrong with it. Mhm.
It's so important to have your mental health in shape, right? And
Yes,
to take
yes.
care of that so that you can function with everything else because that plays a toll on your physical health
Mhm.
and so many other
and everyone around you,
yeah.
because they see you very differently than
Mhm.
you see yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes, depending on the friend or the loved one that's near you, they may say, "Are you okay? Because you seem a
Mm,
little stressed." And you're like, "You can see that?"
yeah.
Thinking, I thought I was hiding it. Yep,
Yeah.
no,
No,
no.
you're not. So what would you say for someone who may be apprehensive or even someone who has made the decision, you know what, I think I need to take that step. Um, what recommendations do you give people when searching for a therapist? Because
Yeah,
every therapist is not going to be the right fit, right? It's,
absolutely.
so how should one go about
Mhm.
making the selection? And it should be far more than just what your insurance is covering or
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely. I, pardon me, I
mm,
always encourage people to start with thinking about, what do I need help with, right? One, is it coaching or is it therapy,
okay.
right? Determining that. Coaching is, we start where you are and move forward to help you meet a goal. We are not tapping into, why do you think so poorly of yourself, right? We're tapping into, why aren't you meeting the goal? Okay. You need to do X number of um, activities to get to your goal. Therapy is, we look at everything.
Mhm,
And I always say to people, we don't have to talk about your past unless you want to talk about your past. But if I see something is in the way, we might need to go talk about, let's just explore, let's poke around, because there may be something there that is holding you back from moving forward. So I always encourage people to identify which one is it that you need.
mhm,
And then after you determine that, you know, World Wide Web is our go-to place. One, you can ask friends and family if you feel comfortable enough. Do you have any referrals? Do you know anyone, right? So tap into some of your circles. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, there's a myriad of websites that you can check, like a therapy for Black girls,
mhm,
clinicians of color, inclusive therapists, psychology today. There's quite a few that you can check. Or you can literally go to Google and type in therapist in my area,
mhm,
right? And
mhm,
it will bring a lot of people up, and that can feel overwhelming. So you need to tap into, do I want a female or a male?
mhm,
Kind of what age group do I want them in, right?
mhm,
It's so interesting sometimes when I would ask people, why did you pick me? And they'll say, I liked your picture. And it's so interesting when you hear that, and it's like, you picked up a lot from a picture. Yes, people pick up a lot from a picture. If you appear welcoming, if you appear stoic,
mhm,
there's certain things that are communicated through a photo. Then
mhm,
read some of the things on their website, should they have one, right?
mhm,
Because some therapists don't have a website. Those
right,
people might be the ones that you get from a referral,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Other than that, go on the website, poke around, do the consultations. This should be a free 15-minute consultation where you talk to the person just to identify, what's your approach, right?
mhm,
Um, how do you take insurance?
mhm,
Insurance do you take? Um, what is the benefit of using insurance, or should I pay out of pocket?
mhm,
Because I do cover that for people, because depending on the job that you have, especially like a lot of our first responders,
yeah,
using insurance feels scary,
mm,
because you don't know what's going to go in your medical file that might impact you later. So I always encourage people to identify paying out of pocket for that. And some people are like, I don't want to do that. And it's like, but this is one way to maintain your privacy,
right,
right?
makes sense.
Using insurance, everything's going to go through there. So it will always be accessible to some other entity.
Mhm,
So I always encourage people to do the consultation, ask the questions. How do you approach your clients? What is your favorite type of client, right? Because maybe I'm not your favorite type of client. And I want to match with someone that wants to meet with people like me that struggle with the things I struggle with. So definitely having a quick consultation with a professional to find out how do you work with people? Am I your people?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that's what I would encourage people to do.
Ooh, that makes so much sense. And I'm thinking about how I've transitioned over the years
Mhm.
based upon my employment and my level of insurance, and thank God for PPO.
Yeah. It is a beautiful thing.
Yes. Because when I had an HMO, I didn't have a
Very
therapist like
limiting.
me.
Very limiting. And
Yes.
toward the time of open enrollment, I do encourage people to always look at your insurance,
Yeah.
because you may not know what you need in the future. Um,
Mhm.
and I understand that HMO is cheaper, and sometimes that's just what you have to do, and that's understandable. But recognize it can be limiting, with especially finding, if you're African American, man or woman, you may have some difficulty identifying a therapist because they just don't open their panels like some others do.
Right, right.
So sometimes it's worth it to pay the few extra dollars to be able to have access to way more providers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely would encourage because now I've seen the lights.
Yes. Yes. I
Trust me.
haven't done HMO since I was 22.
Mm,
I had one experience
mm.
and I was like, yep, that's enough. I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not doing HMO ever again.
And you know what? With all of the experiences I've had with HMOs, one would think that I would have turned that leap much sooner,
Yeah.
but glad
Yeah.
that I finally did. And it's been the last several years, but
Yeah.
definitely to see the difference, especially when needing these types of services,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
now there's no issue with me finding someone who looks like me that I can identify with,
Yeah.
because that's so important. I need to be able for the person that I am working with to be able to see me
Absolutely.
and understand some
Yes.
things without me necessarily having to
To
spell it
break it down.
out.
Mhm,
Right? Yeah.
mhm. There's just this level of an expectation that you will get me, right?
Mm,
But
exactly.
understand every therapist is not made the same,
Right.
and you have to explore. And I always tell people, don't get discouraged and say, "Oh, it's not for me." You may need to try someone else.
Right.
I've gone to therapy on more than one occasion, and if anything, some of it taught me the type of therapist to not be. I've had a
Mm,
therapist fall asleep on me. I have had a therapist tell me, "Don't go into private practice." I also had one that would, she really wasn't interactive.
mm,
She would just kind of sit there and go, "So what do you want to do about that?" And I'm like, "Well, that's why I'm here to
right.
talk it over with you."
Right.
So, the feedback was important for me. I
Hmm.
wanted to be able to have those philosophical conversations and it not seem like it's not going anywhere, because that's how I am, right? I'm one of those thinkers that I look at things philosophically, and I need my therapist to be able to do that as well, right?
Right. Right.
So understanding the parts of me allowed me to identify the therapist that I need, which thankfully I was able to find. So I keep her near my phone,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yes, it can be difficult sometimes, but keep searching. Don't give up.
Okay. And
Mhm.
so if people are interested in coming to your practice to work with one of your many therapists,
Mhm.
how would they go about finding you? I know you're in the south suburbs in the Homewood Baltimore area.
Mhm.
Find you.
So the website is www.insightsts.com. There is also, telephone number, which is
Mhm.
312-818-1260. And I think the website connects you to all of the therapists, including me. I think it's pretty comprehensive. I'm still building it out. As you grow, your technology has to grow with you.
Yeah.
We can be found with the different directories that I discussed, the
Mhm.
therapy for Black girls, inclusive therapists, psychology today. So we're on all of those. We're also in social media. We're also on Facebook, and you can look it up with the company name, Insights Therapeutic Services, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn.
Okay.
So
And
yes.
I of course looked at your website and I see your picture. I can see why somebody would select you. Your picture looks like, I'm going to tell you what I get from your picture.
Okay, please do.
So what I gathered from your picture is that you're like, I don't want to call you like the around the way girl that you could just talk to, but that's the vibe that I get.
And this is so interesting. I am working with a new brand manager and we're trying to come up with, some descriptors. And so as I'm asking clients, we're getting things that we didn't think we would get because
Okay.
it's very hard to put it in a phrase, right? I'm
Mhm,
getting, you're the auntie that I can talk to and you're not going to tell anyone else.
mhm,
You're the sister friend. I get, you're male, not Melanie,
mhm,
not Miss Melanie, you're
mhm,
male, right?
mhm.
So I understand that I do bring this level of relaxation to it,
Yeah,
that it doesn't have to be stressful. It's a conversation and sometimes it's funny. It's not all tears. And I
right.
think some people stray away from it because they think they're going to always be sad, they're going to always be crying, and that's not always the case. Sometimes we are laughing about a situation because sometimes that's what we're left to do,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's like seriously, and it's like seriously,
Mm,
right? So you should be able to be you. If
mhm.
you can't be you in the therapy session, that's not your therapist.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So thank you for that, because that is part of what I do want to communicate. It is non-judgmental,
Mhm.
unbiased, and I'm not here to judge, right? It's a comfort zone.
Yeah.
For me, it needs to be one as well. We
Mm,
will address that if the comfort zone doesn't seem to be there.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say the whole comfort level is so important because that's the only way you're gonna be able to work through whatever it is that you're going through.
Mhm.
You have to feel comfortable with the person that you're working with.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's not gonna work. But
It's critical.
yeah, and I know we didn't get a chance to talk too much in depth, but I do want to, before we kind of wrap up,
Mhm.
you mentioned that 40% of your clients are men,
Yes, yes.
which is that may be a whole nother topic to
Yeah,
tackle.
yeah.
Um, what do you think has led to or contributed to having that
Mhm.
um, level of
You're gonna laugh.
okay,
It's the women that say you need to go to therapy.
really?
Yes.
Huh. Okay.
Those that don't, they may come through like an EAP, and
Okay.
that is because they're like, okay, something's off.
Yeah.
They're very apprehensive. So
Mm,
I have good conversations with them to kind of settle their nerves, because this
okay.
is not a space where we're going to share your information, right? There's always this fear of what I tell you needs to stay with you.
Mm,
So I always have that conversation about your information remaining private. It's very important to everyone, but
mhm.
men especially, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some very sensitive topics. You would be surprised how many men may reveal for the first time, I was sexually molested.
Mhm.
I've never told anyone. They may have been incarcerated and have been struggling to get back into society. The mental health stigma alone, right? I'm supposed to be the provider in my family, and I can't provide because I have depression.
Mhm.
And I cover it up with X, Y, and Z, right? A lot of men don't have tools to regulate themselves. So they go to all the things that they don't need to go to. And so when they do call, there's a little bit more hand holding, because we want them to feel comfortable. You're coming into a safe space, or even meeting online before they come in, because sometimes they're like, well, before I commit, I'll
Mm,
talk to you online. But there's a lot of, sometimes you have the significant other, the female that
mm,
may come,
mhm.
and she may say, well, can I bring him in? And they come in and they're like, mm-hmm, yeah. And before you know it, they're opening up. And then they say, well, can I come see you by myself? Right.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you get that. You'll get a female in their life that may be going. They say, well, I don't know. Well, my sister, my girl, she told me that she goes, so I figured I'd try it out. Okay. Right.
Uh,
Try it out. So they
yeah,
they they tend to come by way of a female.
interesting.
Very interesting.
Mm,
So I try to take special care of them because no one else does.
yeah,
No
but
one
it
else.
it is so important. And I'm going to say this, ladies, if you have a significant other in your life who has,
Absolutely.
expressed that they feel overwhelmed or
Stressed, fatigued,
stressed, yeah,
irritable.
yes,
Mhm.
don't continue to beat him up. Try and help him get the
Get
help that he
somewhere.
needs.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think a lot of people are just so fearful of people knowing what's behind their closed doors.
Mhm.
Trust me, we are not in the business of judging what goes on in your home. We're in the business of trying to help everyone in the home experience some peace and harmony,
Yeah.
even if it's intermittent. That's our goal.
Well, I am happy that you are in the business of trying to help save lives because ultimately that is what
Yeah.
you're
Yes.
doing.
Yes. Saving you on this side of the
Yeah.
dirt, right?
Yeah.
Like truly, we all have this dream of having a particular life and not realizing sometimes it's the way that I see things that is in my way, right? It is the things that I don't want to let go of. I'm still waiting for that apology. I'm still looking for some validation. And we don't realize we have to be the people, we have to be the person for ourselves that other people couldn't be for us.
Right.
So that validation you have to give to yourself. That acceptance you have to give to yourself. Start with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so very
This
much.
was awesome.
Thank you and you'll have to come back again
Absolutely.
and we can talk about some more specific topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But again, give us your website and your phone number.
The
And
website, go ahead. I'm
oh,
sorry.
and I was going to say one other thing that I didn't ask.
Mhm.
Since we're in the world of now where telehealth is available in terms of
Mhm.
virtual sessions,
Mhm.
does your does
Practice.
Insights, your practice, thank you. I
Mhm.
was going to call it company. No, but it is company. But does your practice, do your therapists also offer virtual?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We meet people where they are.
Okay. Good to
Mhm.
know. Good
Yes.
to know.
And the website, to repeat it again, it is insightsts.com. And the phone number is 312-818-1260. And just you can also just Google, Insights Therapeutic Services or go on social media. Every link will lead you to the website.
Perfect. Well, thank
Absolutely.
you so much, my
Thank
fellow
you.
Virgo diva, Melanie, for joining me today. Thank you for giving us some insight about your practice.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank
Again,
you.
for those of you who are in need of services, please make sure you reach out to Melanie Hall in Insights Therapeutic Services, or you know any other therapist.
Yes. Yes.
You've got to find the right fit for you.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but please share this episode with family or friends. Also, remember to follow us on social media, and you can also follow us on all streaming platforms of your choosing. So make sure you check us out next week to see if we have another interesting guest on Light It Up podcast. Until next time, remember to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com.
You can also find me on social media using the handle @LightItUpPodcast. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.